Now, I had Joe Walsh, former presidential candidate, on the show yesterday, and Joe Walsh and Scott Jennings don't seem to get along very well. Rightfully so. I think Scott Jennings is a smug puke, is what he is. And I've talked about the Jeffrey Epstein files a lot on this show. A lot. And I've been very clear on this. I don't care whether somebody is a Republican or a Democrat. I said that during Joe Biden's administration, too, during the Maxwell trial. And there's a lot of people that are very uneducated on this issue. And they'll ask the question, why didn't Biden release it? Why didn't he release the files? Well, under the Maxwell trial during the Biden administration, they were sealed. He was not allowed to do so. But let's just say even if Joe Biden was allowed to do so, I think if that's the case, he should have released them. I believe there are very powerful people on both sides of the aisle that are in those files. Yes, I do believe Donald Trump is clearly one of them. I've been very open and honest on that. But the way that these people on the right continue to curl themselves into a pretzel to defend Donald Trump and say, well, there's really nothing to see here. Let's talk about other stuff. Let's talk about more prevalent stuff like banning books. What does it tell you that when Donald Trump had private meetings with both Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert earlier this week, which he virtually never does. The only reason why he did it is because these are two women that have voted to release the Epstein files. One of the very few things that I agree with these women on, along with Marjorie Taylor Greene. But I want you to listen to this phony on CNN, Scott Jennings. I cannot even watch CNN when this guy is on because he's such a smug puke and so disingenuous. Listen to Scott Jennings when he actually discusses and tries to defend Donald Trump when it comes to these new revelations with Jeffrey Epstein. Have a listen to this.
Yeah, look, I don't dispute there were powerful people around him. Most of them were leftists and globalists. And, Donald Trump, I don't think really had anything to do with it. The lady that you mentioned, Virginia, had said before that she'd only, I think, met Donald Trump once, and he was a perfect gentleman and didn't do anything untoward at all. And so, again, I think these things are being thrown out to try to smear Donald Trump, obviously, to try to change the subject away from the Democratic failures for having shut down the government for 43 days and inflicted pain on the American people. But nothing that I have seen in any of these documents prove anything, tell me anything. No one's ever disputed that Donald Trump knew Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, we've known that for years and years and years. We knew that yesterday. We know it today. And I just don't think, frankly, Caitlin, the American people, when they're looking at the pantheon of issues they've got going on right now, I just don't think this one ranks in that high for them.
So laughable because MAGA Republicans have been talking about the Epstein files for years. And now all of a sudden Donald Trump is the guy that most likely is in these files, and all of a sudden Scott Jennings, I don't think the American people really want to talk about this. Well, I know Donald Trump told you to say that. Donald Trump doesn't want us talking about it. For years, every single day, we heard from MAGA Republicans about the elitists in Hollywood and the pedos and the conspiracy theories, and Bill Clinton is in the files literally every single day. It was Pam Bondi that had those morons out there with binders. Do you remember that in D.C.? Jack Posobiec and those other idiots. And now, all of a sudden, Scott Jennings thinks that he knows what every American is thinking. And now, all of a sudden, he's saying, I don't think Americans really want to talk about this. Oh, no, I do. I do. I'll talk about it every day until they're released. I do. And it's not because I'm on the left. And it's not because any other reason other than the fact that I want these people, these victims, to get justice. That's what I want. And I would ask Scott Jennings this very simple question. Let's talk about Maxwell for a moment, real quickly here. Can somebody please explain to me why Maxwell is getting VIP treatment in jail? She was convicted on a 20-year sentence to being one of the biggest traffickers in American history. She's allowed a dog. They make personalized food sent to her cell. She's allowed guests. Those guests receive snacks. She gets preferential treatment. She's allowed to use laptops. She's allowed to go outside and play tennis whenever she wants to. She has a security guard walking with her to work out at night when she wants to. Why are they giving her that sort of preferential treatment? Can any MAGA Republican please answer that for me? Why? Please, I'm looking for an answer. Any Trump supporters out there, can you please answer that question? Why is Maxwell getting preferential treatment behind bars? And when I mean preferential treatment, I'm not talking about cigarettes. I'm not talking about, maybe a TV. No, I'm talking about VIP treatment, like staying at some sort of 5-star hotel. She's allowed a pet. Can you tell me in the history of this country when someone gets a 20-year sentence and they're allowed a pet and they're allowed to go out with a security guard and work out whenever they want, play tennis, use of laptops? Can you tell me this, ladies and gentlemen, this is unprecedented for this kind of crime. I personally believe that Maxwell is going to be pardoned. I've been saying that for a long time. Now, it might not happen tomorrow. It might not happen next week. But I do believe before Donald Trump leaves office, which hopefully he does, that Maxwell will be pardoned. And I'm wondering what your excuses will be there. Let me tell you something. Everything that you guys claim that you represent, going against child traffickers, which I'm with you. I agree with you. Any sort of serious crime like that, I'm with you. You still support Donald Trump, you have zero credibility. I keep saying that over and over again. You don't. And if you're saying, well, Brian, you don't know what you're talking about, Brian. Again, I ask you this very simple question. Why is the Trump administration working with the warden there, giving Maxwell beyond preferential treatment? Why are other inmates being threatened, we know this for sure, if they speak to her, if they speak negatively about her, if they release any information to the media? Why is the Trump administration doing this? Now, I think if you have an IQ over 20, you probably would know the answer to that. It's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to stop talking about this. I'm going to talk about it every day. Donald Trump doesn't want us talking about it. He called his own supporters stupid for even bringing up Jeffrey Epstein. I've interviewed Jeffrey Epstein's brother on this show multiple times. He did not take his own life. I can assure you of that. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, they know the truth. And Dan Bongino on his show every day talked about the Epstein files and how they should be released. But now all of a sudden he's working in the Trump administration. Shh. They go hush. They don't want you to talk about it. They say case closed. They don't want justice for the victims. Why? Why is that? I think we know the answer. A guy by the name of Donald J. Trump, who was once best friends with Epstein, we know. This is a massive cover-up. And I got to give Stephanie Miller a lot of credit. And I'm actually a fan of Stephanie Miller. I think she does a really good job. And I appreciate the fact that she's willing to go on Dad Bod's show, Sean Hannity, another buffoon on the far right. This is a hilarious moment on Sean Hannity's show last night. I don't know if you guys had the opportunity to watch this, but it really is awesome. So Sean Hannity continues to talk about Joe Biden and his mental capacity, or lack thereof. They continue to talk about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They don't want to talk about what's going on in this country right now. They don't want to talk about inflation, up for the 5th month straight. They don't want to talk about the economy tanking. They don't want to talk about the fact that we're headed towards a recession. They don't want to talk about the fact that many MAGA voted America first, and it seems like it's actually America last. They don't want to talk about all Donald Trump's failings and the fact that his approval numbers are somewhere around 37% or lower. Sean Hannity doesn't want to talk about any of that stuff or Jeffrey Epstein. But he wants to ask Stephanie Miller about Joe Biden's competency. And I love how Stephanie Miller just completely flips the script. Have a listen to this.
Eve, because you're anything but. All right, so I do have a question. I tried to get an answer out of you on radio. Okay, the question is, when did you notice Joe Biden's cognitive decline? And don't change the subject and deflect. When did you really notice it?
Well, I think it was through all of the times that Donald Trump has fallen asleep in public and talked about, magnets getting wet in the last few,
oh my gosh.
My mom had dementia, so I recognize
Stephanie,
it. And
this is not, it's a very good deflection. You're a professional.
You know what else is great about
Biden's
decline is that Trump is all over the Epstein files, and I'm wondering if they're going to release those. Are you covering that tonight?
Not really, because the woman that apparently they're talking about is the one that said he was a gentleman and never did anything wrong. And the person that had a grudge was the guy that got thrown out of Mar-a-Lago 25 years ago. And by the way, when you get thrown out of a club in Palm Beach, Florida, that's kind of a big deal. And it's very humiliating and embarrassing. And he was a convicted pedophile. So I'm not exactly putting a lot of gospel truth in what he said.
Trump was mad that he was stealing his girls, but
Yeah. Ask about Joe Biden's decline. By the way, great job, Stephanie Miller. That's the way you got to handle these right-wing boobs. Are you covering the Epstein stuff today, or do you want to talk about Joe Biden's competence? He's not the president anymore. Are you covering Epstein? Not really. Not really. You stupid buffoon, you.